Hello, everyone. If everything tech-wise is working, you can hear me. I hope that's true. Hi, all. Just, basically, this is a quarantine check-in because it's been, a little more than 2 months of us being reserved to quarantine. And naturally, we've all been watching a lot of things, playing a lot of games, taking up hobbies, and doing all that. So I initially was going to make sort of a quick bits of all the things that I'd been watching while in quarantine video. And then I realized that it would probably turn into... I started recording it. It turned into like a hour-long thing on just a single one, and I was like, I'm going to die editing, and I would prefer not to do that. So this is going to be a bit of a back and forth convo of... We'll start just with like what I've been watching during quarantine, what you've been watching during quarantine. We'll have some recommendations, and then at the end, I'll open it up to just like a general Q&A if you want or feel so inclined. So I have a list. So I'll start with actually the sort of miscellaneous things that I've been doing in quarantine. I am one of the fortunate people who has been able to work remotely. My job, outside of a few minor components, for those unfamiliar, I work for That One Video Gamer or The Completionist on YouTube. And so doing video game related content as a creative director or creative producer. One of the things that we did in the uptick of all of this, actually last week, we had a charity stream on Twitch and we raised $20,000 for direct relief. And that was something that I was really involved with, trying to coordinate with indie developers and things like that to get them present on the show. But yeah, I've been very lucky in that there hasn't actually been that much of a slowdown outside of the can't go outside sort of thing, which has kind of killed me because right now it's, springtime and I like hiking. And so I've not really been able to go out on trails with people, and it's not exactly encouraged to go out on a trail alone. You can do it, but just if you run into a lurch, especially now with fewer and fewer people out, that's a bad call. So that's some of the miscellaneous stuff. I've also, as a result, though, been reading more, which is great. I started up Cat's Cradle, and I also picked up this series of short stories by N.K. Jemisin, sort of sci-fi stuff. And those have been really great. I've been reading those on the Libby app. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. This isn't like a pitch for it, or like it's not a brand deal. But it just allowed me to like sync my library card with it, and then I'm able to like ebook it away. Doesn't cost me anything, which is nice. And then outside of that, other apps I suppose I've been using, the Nike training app, again, not a brand deal, but I've been doing that because they have little like, 15 to, or even shorter to like 30 to more exercises. And since I don't have any equipment in my apartment, it's nice to be able to like tap the no equipment option, and then I'm able to work out and be, relatively active. But yes, the main thing that you know me for, well, I suppose you know me for two things at this point. The Obituary pilot, which is now a comic. If you're unaware of that, you can check that out if you just type Obituary comic in Webtoons. We've been posting episodes that way. And then the other thing that you probably know me for is movie reviews and commentary of that nature. So what have I been watching? And don't worry, chat, I'm going to be scrolling back and addressing a lot of what you've said, as there, fortunately, I feel it allows, there aren't that many of you right now, like swarming, so I can actively address them. So checking the list. The first thing that I sort of started with was around, I think it was end of March, early April. I mean, in the midst of it, there were a few other things, but HBO Now became, or like a limited portion of it became free. I do not own HBO. The only way that I've been able to watch HBO shows is by going over to friends' places, or if I'm house sitting and they happen to have HBO, that's how I watched the first season of Barry, the first season of Westworld, and I watched Game of Thrones either, by going to viewing parties and things like that. But getting a chance to sort of dip into the back catalog was really exciting. I watched the first season of The Wire, started to watch the second season of The Wire, and then HBO was like, surprise, you should sign up for HBO Max. HBO Now is evaporated, or the free side of it. How many of you in the chat sound off if you have watched The Wire? Because I'm not going to talk like spoilers by any stretch of the imagination, but I am going to talk loosely about it. Because the thing that The Wire has been one of those shows that's been hailed by many as a strong standing, this is key core television. You have to watch The Wire. What are you doing if you haven't watched The Wire? To give you the briefest of breakdowns, this is the Baltimore Police Department. At least the first season is looking into Avon Barksdale, who is running drugs, and they're trying to, and the, I guess, main character, McNulty, although it's become something of an ensemble piece, basically gets a chip on his shoulder, and because he's a really good cop, but a really shitty person, it's just following him and the whole team trying to take down Avon Barksdale and his nephew, D'Angelo, and then, like, you've got Stringer Bell in there, who is played by, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name, Idris Elba, and, like, you've also got Michael B. Jordan in there, like, it's a young, like, very, very young. The cast of this is incredible, and the thing that is so remarkable is really when you start to parse the dialogue, so to speak. There's nothing that is it's not flowery, it's not really poetic, but it is so colloquial and everything feels lived in that you 100% believe everything that's going on. It's also really great because this doesn't really convey so much yes, there are like the conventional sense of like, oh, they're selling drugs, and yes, they're shooting people. That makes them bad. But the show does a pretty good job of not casting too much judgment, and at the same time showing there's a large amount of darkness attached to many of our main characters. McNulty's a top-tier fuck-up. Daniels, who is his superior, is like caught in the mire of the Baltimore politics. And honestly, Daniels started as I'm blanking on the actor's name, but he later went on to be in Fringe, and he's also good there. But this is one of those shows where like everyone's sort of neutral and walks that line so miraculously that you find yourself rooting for all of the characters when you know full well, much like, you know, near the end of Game of Thrones, regardless of how you feel the ultimate fallout is, you've been following all these characters who are ultimately going to be pitted against one another. And so that is it's an impressive trick to pull off, to convince your audience to root for everyone and know that everyone won't come out on top. Season 2 does shift from drugs to longshoremen. I only got about halfway through, so I think I saw Ziggy's dick 3 times. And there's also the whole issue of human trafficking and prostitution. And so that's, tricky. I hope that I can pick it up either convincing a friend to let me borrow their HBO account, or I just have a tendency, like, I'm not as invested as I should be in, like, I have Netflix and I have Disney Plus, and I don't feel that I utilize them enough to warrant picking up HBO just yet. But that may change. But yeah, if any of you do have HBO and have been curious if The Wire is worth your time, I would absolutely say yes. I will say, however, that it is a slow burn start of a show, and it doesn't explain a lot to you. You are just supposed to infer. And by episode 3 or 4 of the first season, you're like in it 100%. But if you were someone who perhaps watched, if you watched Mad Men and loved it, I feel like this is in a similar vein of some episodes sort of meander in this slow burn setup, and you just are like, what's this about? Where is this headed? And eventually it, like, really cleanly. To Landon Van Buskirk, I've also heard The Leftovers and Deadwood are incredible. Those are near the top of my list, but I didn't make it through The Wire. Also, what I watched while I did have access to the HBO Now free trial, I guess, was I checked out the McMillions docuseries, which I'm someone who is always drawn to those, like, because it's for those unfamiliar, basically for 13 years, the McDonald's Monopoly game was rigged. Someone on the inside was taking the winning pieces and selling them off, and then taking a profit, like a low-tier mafioso sort of scheme. And the unraveling that the FBI needs to do to pinpoint this single person, and then the reveal of how he did it, is just, it's very impressive. It's obviously, the documentarians did a very, very good job of sort of stringing the audience along in how. I don't fault them for it, because it's, I mean, we've now, there are so many stories that I think rely on cheap tricks, and this doesn't rely on cheap tricks, but it definitely teases out the information as you're going along, and withholds a little bit with a cheeky sort of like, what's going to happen next? The people involved in this, who were involved both on the side of running the scam and also the FBI, are characters. They're just, they're so interesting, and the reasons for doing what they're doing. And obviously it's always an interesting thing when you're coming into a, hey, I got really screwed, or these people were screwing these people, or I had my life destroyed, and then able to look back on it with some degree of hindsight and to see what they are or aren't enlightened about is always really interesting to me. So if you like more sort of like true crime, I mean, this is more like a white collar crime situation, so you're not looking at too many bodies, but it's a very interesting story. That one I recommend. I would also recommend that. Other things. Okay, so the large scale achievement that I had was I finished watching all of The West Wing, which is 7 seasons. And for those who haven't watched The West Wing, this is Sorkin, I would say, not at his Sorkiniest. He's just starting to fully find all of his Sorkinisms. The snappy delivery is there. This is where the walk and talks, I believe, really came into full swing as a Sorkin-ism, so to speak. But the casting, and the thing that is also so remarkable is so many people of the cast are in supporting roles and are then going on to incredible things. Like, this is a show before Weeds with Mary Louise Parker. This is before Mad Men with Elizabeth Moss. This is before Psych. This is before Parks and Rec. Like, and all of these people who are in those are in this. And like you just have an episode where Glenn Close is a Supreme Court or like about to be a Supreme Court justice, like, or John Goodman shows up at the end of the 4th season, like, and is there for a little bit. This show has so much strong star power. Lily Tomlin, Martin Sheen, like, everyone is incredible. I will agree with you, Brendan, to her, that the 5th season is rough. And the reason the 5th season is rough, as I'm sure you're aware, is after the first 4 seasons, Aaron Sorkin left the show. And that left producer, I believe it's John Wells, in charge of figuring out what the situation, like, because they left it on a cliffhanger. Season 4 ends, slight spoilers, that the president basically rescinds his responsibilities, which defers then, based on extreme circumstances, to the Speaker of the House, who is John Goodman. So John Goodman, who is a Republican, we've been existing in a Democratic presidency. So a Republican then takes over the circumstance while they're sort of in this mire. And then when you pick up season 5, they just are like, what are we going to do? Oh, we're going to resolve this issue pretty quickly and not actually make it that difficult on many of our characters. And then we're going to flip everyone's roles. Like, CJ Craig goes from the communication director, is played by Allison Janney, goes from the communication director to being chief of staff. And then that makes Toby need to fill that role. And at that point, then Kristen Chenoweth gets roped in. And, I mean, Will Bailey has already been brought in to replace, what's his name, who was in the first 3 and then wound up in Parks and Rec. I'm blanking on his name. But, yeah, there is a lot going on there. And I like that. Someone says that Super Chat is turned off. I don't know what that means or how I can activate that. So I apologize. And I could look at this on the back end right now, but I think that will just make things gross. I don't know how to turn Super Chat on. Oh, I know what that is, but I don't know how to turn it on, so I'm so sorry. If you... The F is Super Chat. I don't know what that... Now we're into weird managing. Nope, I don't know how to do it. But anyway, we'll continue talking on about that. So I'll continue talking about The West Wing. So yeah, season 5 is wonky. Yeah, sorry, chat. I appreciate you wanting to potentially give me money. But I don't seem to easily be able to do it because, oh, no, I see enable live chat. I see enable slow mode. I don't see anywhere to enable super chat. Maybe in the community settings. It crashed. Cool. So, oh, thank you for the Beardly comment on, or kingly comment on my beard, minor moments of dyslexic behavior. So sorry on that, but we're going to continue talking about the West Wing for a little bit. So the West Wing, yeah, it's a very interesting thing because obviously, I would say, and maybe I'm naive to this, I feel like while obviously we're dealing with a Democratic presidency in that scenario, and there is a definite degree of idealism to the whole show, I feel like they're fairly even on how they view and approach some of the discussion points that obviously the show is going to be dealing with when you're dealing with the politics of it all. I don't think they're ever poo-pooing Republicans, liberals, any ideology that's sort of swayed in there, and I don't think that, and I think they're fairly evenly showing the fault in some of it. But again, maybe I'm naive to all of that. I will say, once you get past so 1 through 4 of The West Wing are really stellar. Really stellar story-wise. Season 5 is just like, it's puberty for the show. And season 6 and 7, it's a election arc, which at that point, you definitely, some of the characters get sidelined. Toby gets sidelined, Will gets sidelined. But characters like Josh, played by Bradford, he gets to just, rock and roll with Jimmy Smits. You also get Alan Alda brought in for that. It's really wild that it, around this time, it's around 2002 when season 6 and 7 happened, if I'm not mistaken, 2002, 2003. And Jimmy Smits also at about this time was brought on for the prequel trilogy. So I just feel like he was drawn to being political figures and also coming into projects that were a little bit past their prime in the general, perception of the aren't as good, quote, many, and many were like, oh, well, The West Wing is done. But season 6 and 7 are really compelling. You just have to go in not expecting to be with Martin Sheen a lot. You're not going to be dealing with the president. He becomes a supporting character, which is honestly what he was really expected to be initially. But then the show did really well with him. He tested very positively, and Martin Sheen is incredible in that. My God, everybody, there is not a bad actor on The West Wing, which is a rarity for a show. You can always point to one or two where you're like, I don't know about that casting, but yeah, I agree, Brendan. It really does feel like season 6 and 7 really does feel like a spinoff. So yeah, that was my major accomplishment so far. Also in terms of quick, things that I've been watching on Netflix, but I haven't watched all of them. I started to watch Midnight Gospel, which for those of you who are unfamiliar, it's Pendleton Ward of Adventure Time, his new show. Which is animation over a podcast of a guy that he really likes. I don't remember the name of the guy whose podcast it is. That's dealing with more magic and out there existentially things, and they've animated it. And I'd say it's to varying effect. I watched the first 3 episodes. I think the animation is phenomenal, but I don't necessarily feel that the animation always really ties in, and it's something that, if you just wanted something pretty to look at, you most certainly could do that. You could just turn it on and watch it. But I don't necessarily feel that there's it's as connected across what is being said and what is being seen. Visually dazzling. Some of the concepts, I think it was episode 3 that I really connected with. But 1 and 2 I was a little iffy on. Other things that I've been watching, Nadia's Time to Eat. For those who are unaware, I am unabashedly a softie for the wholesomeness that is the Great British Baking Show. And Nadia was a favorite of mine, so for her to get her own cooking show is a delight. Also, side note, if you are a fan of the Great British Baking Show, if you are a fan of the Great British Baking Show, Kim Joy now has her own YouTube channel, and she's been uploading new cooking recipes every Friday, and those have been delightful. She is, for those unfamiliar with Kim Joy, she's a very colorful individual. I'll just leave it at that. And she makes things that are seemingly pretty easy to make. I've just been making a lot of banana bread while in quarantine, and some cookies periodically. But Nadia's Time to Eat, she shows a lot of quick little life hacks that make me go, oh, I really want to, I want to try some of these that is great. So that was that. And Nadia's just sensibilities are really charming. There's a degree of it that feels a little forced, because at the end of it, every time they have someone that she's helped call in later to be like, you helped save me so much time, which is cute. It's just, I'm a cynic. I don't know. Like, I have a soft spot, but I'm also a cynic. And it's kind of cool to see how she then also visits at the latter half of every episode. She visits a plant that might, this is where mushrooms are packaged, or this is where cream is made, or something like that. So getting to see where the food is made is always interesting. And yes, to somebody said, am I aware that Midnight Gospel has an overarching theme? Yes, I am, Jeff Y. I am aware of that. So far, it seems like he's just been picking up a lot of shoes. But I am going to go back to that. And the other show that I'm in the middle of, the middle of a lot of shows, guys, and I need to just finish them. The trend will continue. I started up because some friends were watching Call My Agent on Netflix Party, and I needed to catch up. And Call My Agent is a French, it's not a sitcom, it's a dramedy more so, but it's a series, and it is a talent agency in Paris that is just dealing with all the actors that they represent and the death of their head of the agency at the end of the first episode. And then there's one character who has some relationship with someone who's now an assistant there. It's really interesting. It's also fun to just be watching, let's see what a French show is like. I've not watched much international television outside of some anime. So getting to see how Europe is sort of doing it, it's pretty cool. Continuing on. And then the other shows now entering Disney Plus. I have been watching Prop Culture, which is a documentary series about, I think it's Dan Telfer. No, that's not correct. What is his name? There's a guy who collects a lot of movie props, and it's him wandering around, not wandering around. He's commissioned by Disney to find memorabilia from movies like the original Mary Poppins, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Pirates of the Caribbean, and handle them, meet with prop and wardrobe and cast and directors. He meets with the director of Tron and talks about hey, is this the original disc and all that? So it obviously also, this is one where, being a docuseries, there's some degree of fabricated emotional responses of all that cynical me is skeptical about. But it's enjoyable, and it's pretty quick. Also, the episode with the Muppets, where they have Gonzo on for a moment and he doesn't give him a sentimental response, is delightful. So, and then the final show, is it the final show that I'm watching right now? Is DuckTales. the 2017 reboot of the series. I just finished season 1, and guys, DuckTales is so fun and so well written and so sharp. I don't necessarily feel that they need like that full voice cast of actors. Of like it would have been cool if we had gotten more voice actors as opposed to actors, like Bobby Moynihan and Jason Schwartz and David Tennant are all great. I'm just like, what about voice actors? Like, these guys don't need as much money, but do not sleep on DuckTales. If you want a zany, sharp comedy with stylistically very slick animation, DuckTales on Disney Plus is great. And I'm really excited to dive into the through line. Flintheart Glomgold might be my favorite villain. He's just so delightful and well acted. Yeah, Jeff Y. David Tennant, if I'm not mistaken, David Tennant is the voice of Scrooge. You can Google that and confirm it. But I'm seeing, and then what are the last things that I watched? I watched through a lot of the special features of Lord of the Rings again, because pound for pound, guys, Lord of the Rings, that original trilogy box set Blu-ray, is like the best Blu-ray of just extra and special features. It is so good. It is so good and so much. I love how much they care about everything they're doing. It is so impressive. So yeah, I didn't watch. Well, I watched Fellowship. I was watching a little bit of Fellowship for like a project that I'm writing, and I just was like, how do they do this? And so I was charting some things out, and then was like, well, I can't just watch a little bit of it. I have to watch all of it. And speaking of Sean Bean, some of you joined me for a Netflix party when I watched National Treasure. That's fun. It's not necessarily a movie that, like, I'd not seen it before. It's fun. It's not necessarily the strongest, because it's like the set pieces aren't that exciting, but they're fine. I think some of it just comes down to like going on adventures in modern day Philadelphia doesn't necessarily have as much zing as, you know, if you're in a more exotic locale or rural locale, like anything that is more than just buildings. And then I also rewatched Into the Spider-Verse through a Netflix party with some friends, which that is another one where I was like, I'm working on something right now, guys. And they were like, we're Netflix partying, we're watching this. And I was like, okay, I'll take a break and watch a little bit with you. And the minute that I started watching it, I was like, well, I'm watching the rest of this now. Because, guys, if you haven't seen Into the Spider-Verse, the animation alone is like, you can pause that movie at any point and it is a perfect still. But the music is also incredible. The voice acting is godlike. The fact that we have to wait so long for a sequel hurts me, but it will be worth it. Oh no, Jason Whitmore. I've seen Into the Spider-Verse. I saw it 3 times in theaters and then have watched it. Like, I own the Blu-ray, and I don't own that many Blu-rays, but I was like, I need to see everything that went into the behind the scenes of this. And they have like a flipped, an alternate cut that starts with a Spider-Ham cartoon, which is, again, also great. That movie is perfect. It, like, you forget that it's an origin story movie, and then it still gets you. It's so good. And then I watched Onward. That's the last thing that I've watched. I watched Onward, which it was fine. I was hoping for a little bit more, just like whimsy, and it felt too grounded in reality almost. Like I think the Pixar formula of two dissimilar characters go on a journey is becoming a little tired, or they just didn't have the right like pings and pongs throughout all of it. And then, so those are the movies I've watched. I've also mentioned the books that I've read, the apps that I'm using, and the games that I'm playing. I did pick up Animal Crossing, as some of you, if you follow me on Twitter, @BelatedMedia, I've posted a few times when I'm like, come over, because turnip prices are high or something. So I've been tapering off of that lately, which is good, because I definitely needed to set a timer for myself. Like I downloaded the parental controls app to set a limit so it would ring at me if I went over the threshold. But I also then very foolishly started playing Breath of the Wild on Master Mode. I haven't played Breath of the Wild since 2017, so it was fresh going back. There were a lot of puzzles and moments that I was like, I don't remember this at all. And I did download the DLC, so I've just bested all the Divine Beasts. And the thing that is most remarkable about Breath of the Wild for me is that it's the first time that I actually feel connected to Zelda, and she's a character that I'm not actually with the whole time. Like, you just get those little snippets of memories. Oscar T, who seen Mikey's videos on Breath of the Wild. No, I haven't. And just the sense of explore and the fact that the game does such a good job of, oh, you want to go over there? Nope, you're going to get zigzagged over here. The way that the game pulls you, but does it so organically, is really impressive. It makes you forgive the fact that story-wise, it's pretty weak. But you're also rarely playing. I rarely am playing a Zelda game for like the most compelling of stories. But I do like the Gerudo and the Zora storylines. I think that those are pretty well fleshed out, and those characters are really impressive. Micah Henry asked, any RPG tabletop gaming? Not exactly, but that actually did remind me, I have been playing, and the irony is palpable. My friends and I started playing Pandemic Legacy Season 1 in November of last year. We've since made it digital in the fact that I made a Photoshop file that I can then screen share with friends, and my other friends have the board, and another friend is playing it on Tabletop Simulator, and so we're meeting every Friday on Zoom to try to tackle this thing, and we're just about to enter December, and we got bodied in. For those unfamiliar with Pandemic Legacy, this is a cooperative game of all the players against the board, and every player has a unique role that can grant them certain abilities and powers. I've been almost exclusively been playing as the Quarantine Specialist. Also, in the Legacy version, you can add upgrades to characters, so my character can pass through roadblocks, which a lot of characters can't do. And I also can sabotage military compounds, which without needing to like have that specific card, which is very helpful for our end game sort of stuff. So we're looking into tackling Season 2 if we best Season 1. And then also, my friend had a D&D light birthday quest where I played the villain. So that was fun. But I think those are all the major items that I needed to tell you and give you the breakdown of. So now I'm going to turn it over to the questions. I'm going to scroll up, if you'll forgive me, and I'm just going to see if there are any notable questions that I would love to answer. Guy Kusana asks, how's your Sunday going? Oh, for you all. That was for everyone. I'll answer while some of you answer Guy's question. My Sunday started out weird because I was going to go grocery shopping and my battery died in my car. So I got to call AAA and learn, oh, right, because my car is from 2013 and I've not changed the battery before because I don't drive actually that much. But yeah, my battery was long past needing to be replaced, so that happened. And then this started a little bit later than expected because of that. But we're here now. Jordan Grant asks, could we expect another entry in your Snyder videos after Justice League, the Snyder Cut? Okay, I have thoughts on the Snyder Cut, and they're a little bit cynical. So I am of... Well, first of all, I've not seen Justice League. Like, I just didn't watch it. I said if it shows up on a plane, maybe I'll watch it on a ride back, but the movie's also very long, so most of the flights that I was going on, I'm like, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to finish this, and then I'm not going to pick this up in a hotel room. So I haven't actually watched the Justice League, Joss Whedon's, or, you know, that hodgepodge. So the answer there is maybe, but the thing that I feel about the Snyder Cut is I think that some of the Release the Snyder Cut movement was actually fabricated by Warner Brothers a little bit. Yes, I'm going into tinfoil hat territory. I apologize. But my reasoning for it is, as far... Granted, I have not looked into this that much, but if the ad that I saw about the Snyder Cut is true, it says Justice League Snyder Cut only on HBO Max. Which means, yes, you can pirate it, but the only other way that the average consumer can view this particular thing is if they sign up for HBO Max. And as Warner Brothers has a stake in that, it just seems like it was a business move. And so, like, whether it was organic or a little bit fabricated, I think that the groundswell around the request was weaponized for commercialism. So, yay to that. Time permitting, I mean, my buddy Zan and I are still very close. We actually also did a Zoom call to play the game Dice Throne because we both have copies of the game, so we were able to set up our respective character boards. For those unfamiliar, Dice Throne is an incredible game. It's a 1v1 or 2v2, basically Overwatch meets Yahtzee, if that makes sense. Each of your character cards has special abilities. You roll the die a number of times. If you happen to match the certain alignments, you can do attacks, gain abilities, and status updates and effects and things like that. And it's pretty fun and quick. And the season 3, or not season 3 box set, season 1 re-rolled box set, I did kickstart, and there's like an adventure campaign that's coming out soon. I fell down the tabletop rabbit hole a little bit ago, and I regret nothing. Micah Henry asks, better than Breaking Bad? I believe this was when I was talking about The Wire. Having not watched all of The Wire, I can't say for sure. I did like Breaking Bad a lot, but from the 1.5 seasons that I've watched of Breaking Bad to compare to The Wire to Breaking Bad, it's hard to call. I think they're both very good. I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. I think that they're both good. Looking for question marks. Yes, I'm sorry. The super chat is turned off. I don't know how to turn it on. Jeff Y, you've already been addressed. Yes, I have given my thoughts on Rogue One. And there's a review of it. I'm sorry to point you to that. Have I watched The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, asks Abraham Bacon. No, I haven't. I've heard it's very good. I don't have Amazon Prime or Amazon Video. If someone were to have it, I would be... I mean, Truthfully, I really should watch it because I actually have a friend who works on the production design of it, and everything that he's shown me related to it looks visually incredible, and I'd like to support my friend Jan. But no, I have not watched it yet, but the premise seems intriguing. I also, if I do get Amazon Video, I want to watch Fleabag. I've heard that's incredible as well. Jeff Y asked, did you see The Lighthouse? Oh, yes, I saw The Lighthouse. I actually saw The Lighthouse under very bizarre circumstances in that it was presented on an IMAX screen, which works. It wasn't like an IMAX projection of it, but it was on an IMAX screen, and they put a little disclaimer of like, this is not an IMAX film. Please do not believe that this is an IMAX film. And all of us had a nice chuckle about that. The Lighthouse is a trip. It's also, I've not seen that much Robert Pattinson. I've only really seen, like, I'd not watched the Twilight films. The only other thing I'd really seen him in was Good Time, or Good Times. I forget which, if it's Time or Times. Also by the Safdie brothers, who did Uncut Gems that came out this past year. And that film gave me a legit, like, panic attack. I like something about the pulsing music, or the fact that everybody that Robert Pattinson got in contact with just wound up in a shitty situation. Like, it went from bad to worse always, had me so anxious. I needed to physically remove myself from the theater for a little bit. The Lighthouse did not have that effect on me, but it's very well acted. Like, both Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson are incredible. It is, and there is a moment, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but it's a moment that makes you as the audience go, wait. Like, do we not have a reliable narrator? And it's a good moment. It's a good moment. Oscar T, it wasn't a question, but just to tell you, you said, rewatch Portrait of a Lady on Fire for the 10th time, masterpiece. I agree. Portrait of a Lady on Fire was definitely in my top 5 of last year. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, the performances across the board, the cinematography, just, it was such a well-constructed film without ever feeling overwrought or gauche. It could have felt very heavy-handed, and I don't think it ever did. Continuing on down the questions, who's my favorite Lord of the Rings character? It's Gandalf. Like, is that a cheap answer? Like, Ian McKellen is just so good. I enjoy Ian McKellen a hell of a lot, and so I'd be hard pressed to not say Gandalf. Checking around. Oh, there the questions are. All of a sudden, everything loaded. Would you have a chat over Discord about your opinion on indie weird horror movies? Here's the thing. I am a remarkable scaredy cat when it comes to horror films. I watched It Chapter 1 when it first came out on my birthday with my buddy Zan, who plays Zack Snyder in the Fun Times with Zack videos. And by the end of the film, I was like full down, scrunched in my seat. Like, I do not. Granted, I did handle Chapter 2 a lot better. Maybe that's because many of the tactics that they tried to use were a lot of rinse repeat. Not a huge dig on the film, a moderate one. But narratively, I actually liked Chapter 2 a lot, and I thought it really filled in a lot of the character spots. Guy Kusano asks, have you played either Pokemon Sword or Shield? I've played Pokemon Shield, and I just sort of dropped off it after I beat the, not Elite Four, but like became the champion and then did all of the doubles battle. I don't like the direction of many games being we're going to keep putting out more content after the game. I like to be able to go, I'm done with this, which is then weird because I picked up Animal Crossing, as there's... I wish that in Animal Crossing, just some of those NPCs would, like, show up at the same time. Just have, like, Flick and CJ on the island at the same time, or Red, or whoever. Like, don't give me one at a time. Like, if someone shows up at my campsite, also have Sahara be there. I don't know. But I do like the ability to be kind of done with a game. And so I haven't been feeling any of the pull to, like, get the Gigantamax forms of various Pokemon, which is a bit of a bummer. I'm curious about the DLC, but I don't know if I'll pick it up. Georgie Mack asks, did you enjoy the ending of Game of Thrones? Could we get an if Game of Thrones Season 7 was good? Okay, so I have, I guess, the uncanny ability to be able to discern what they were trying to do and what they did and separate them and go, oh, well, they were trying to do that. It could have been done this. And I just, like, headcanon away the stuff that didn't work for me. So I think I will agree that Season 8 was not great. But I think, and I think some, like, there were just missing puzzle pieces, I feel. Like, there were certain elements, like Bran ending up as king, spoilers, didn't track. Like, we needed to see something there. And the moment of, like, Jon Snow not getting anything at the end, both with the Night King and with... There are things I'm curious about. As someone who's also read the books, I'm very curious, like, what elements... like, characters like Lady Stoneheart, or the fact that Euron had that... what was it, like a conch that could control dragons? Those are things that you're like, that seems like it would be a huge freaking deal if it was in the plot of the show, but I don't have any gauge of what that is. So I don't think I'm going to be doing a what if on either of, on Season 7 or Season 8, or how many seasons was it? I don't even remember anymore. But, yeah, I didn't hate it, but I acknowledge that it certainly has problems. Then we say, there's been someone, Patty Wall, you ask, have you watched Avatar: The Last Airbender? I have not. And it is the next show that I'm going to be watching since it's on Netflix now. I've heard that it is incredible storytelling. The characters and the world are rich. The only thing that I know about it is bloodbending is a thing for waterbenders. So that might have been a spoiler, but, like, that's all I know. I don't know anything about what the real stakes are. I think the Fire Nation is bad, but I'm very excited to dive into that. Oh, that's a show that I need to pick back up. I've heard that season 5 of She-Ra is great. I got, like, halfway through season 4, and then something in my life happened and I stopped watching, and then I just never picked it back up. But that show also has some really solid characters and great storytelling. Continuing on. Paul Steffens, have you rewatched Community on Netflix? I have not rewatched Community on Netflix. I did watch the table read that happened. And then as a result, YouTube then recommended every goddamn blooper reel of Community because the algorithm is remarkably screwy like that. And now I'm just like, I don't want that Community right now. I do want to rewatch it because I actually watched it. I don't think I watched all of season 1, truth be told. I think I really started watching it mid-season 2. If that's when the paintball episode happened, I don't even remember. Like, there were, like, 1 or 2 episodes that I was like, oh, this is consistently up my alley. And so I don't actually... I think I've seen the pilot and, like, 2 episodes right after that. And then I think it was patchy. Do you prefer Hereditary or Midsommar? Again, scary movies scare me. I have I actually have them because I'm a Film Independent subscriber. So I have the DVDs of both because they were nominated for Independent Spirit Awards, and I haven't watched them because I'm anxious. Oh, why are these loading at such a weird rate? To answer your question, Eduardo Ribiero, who says, I don't think you talked about that on YouTube, but quick thoughts on Rise of Skywalker? I'm not being a hater, but I think it's a very poor movie, which hurt a lot as a Star Wars fan. Okay, so I'll try to be quick. I know many of you have texted me, or not texted, have tweeted at me and messaged about would I do a what if on the sequel trilogy, or would I do one on Rise of Skywalker? I think were I to do one, it would just be on Rise of Skywalker and try to operate under both Force Awakens and Last Jedi happen exactly as is, because there's a lot to work with there. There's like so much that needs to still be interwoven. I think that there are moments in Rise of Skywalker that actually feel the most in line with the camaraderie that exists in the original trilogy, even more so, I would say, than in the prequels. I think the best example of that is the right after the light speed skipping bit, up until like right before she force lightnings, or right before she force lightnings not Chewie's transporter, and maybe the Sand Snake bit. I don't remember the exact order of things. Like, I think that whole speeder chase and everything in that area is very enjoyable. Do I feel that Lando needs to come back and basically play the trope of the wise old magical black man? No. Do I feel that Palpatine needs to be back? Also, no, because it really undercuts what was set up of Kylo Ren now being top dog, and for him to just be like, I was top dog, but now I'm subservient again. There are a lot of options of what you can be doing with him, and I think throwing Palpatine back into the mix and then suddenly being like, the lore is that Skywalkers and Palpatines have always been a thing, when it's like, but that wouldn't be a thing because Palpatine and Skywalker wasn't a thing until Anakin, unless there were other Skywalkers that we didn't know about, which is it uproots a bunch of weird stuff within that realm. The other thing is, like, have I been giving like a great amount of thought and being like, I'm making a what if? No. I have thought on it. But the one thing that I have thought on, which just to show you a little bit how my mind works, is like, were I to do this, I feel like I would need to create one situation where you do incorporate Palpatine and one situation where you don't. And just sort of see how both could work. So, like always, I'm making things harder on myself. But yeah, I mean, I was the person who like walked out of the film and was like, it was all right. And then the more I thought about it, I was like a little more upset. And then I felt very bad because I watched this again on Christmas with my parents and my brother, as is a tradition now of we go and see movies on Christmas, and they walked out of it and were like, that was great. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, I can point out a bunch of things right now that will make you go, yeah. And I don't want to do that for you. And they were like, that's fine. And my mom was like, I'm going to enjoy being ignorant in this moment. And I was like, that's fine. Like, for those who enjoyed it, I say great. I'm more excited, truth be told, about everything that The Mandalorian is doing. I'm a little hesitant that it's like trying to rope characters from the other movies into it. I liked it being its own thing, but we'll see. Marcus Bishop asks, have you done a video on The Room? No. I'm actually one of those people who doesn't necessarily get a great amount of joy from watching bad movies. And for that exact reason, I also didn't really enjoy The Disaster Artist. I felt like it was punching down a lot of the time. But like, I see the merit in watching bad movies. I just don't find it that fun. I don't know. Dirty Dan asks, have you played the Metal Gear series? Any thoughts on that? I've only played Metal Gear Solid 5. And so Phantom Pain, and also whatever the like prequel, like hour and a half long experience was. I enjoyed them. I don't necessarily have anything to say on its story because I was just like, I'm here for the gameplay because I don't know the lore. It was fine. In terms of the story, I actually felt the gameplay was great. And until it started repeating things, I was like, I don't know about this. When it started repeating things, I was a little iffy and then just sort of dropped off. So I didn't see it through to the end. But everything that I played of it, I really enjoyed. Abraham Bacon asked, did you see 1917? Yes, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is a technical feat. I think story-wise, it's okay. I think it's very well acted, but it's just hats off to my boy. The cinematography is like the moment that he crosses the bridge and the camera skims over the water, so we get like a perfect profile shot of him, is one of the most dazzling shots. That, and also, or like camera move, that and the moment where he comes upon the burning church, like everything at night with the flares, the fact that they set up everything that they did to make that happen is just technically astounding. Have I watched any of the Star Wars Clone Wars series? I have not. I've heard that it might be worth getting into. I've heard that season 7 is incredible. But I'm wondering if it's worth waiting through 6 seasons or 4 seasons of okay to get to great. Oh my goodness. Stuart Lugsden asks, have you seen Colin Trevorrow's version of episode 9? I haven't. I know that it exists. I'm reading through a few other scripts, but I haven't, like, reading basically a spec isn't top of my list. I actually, one that I started reading that is fun to read is Knives Out, because like anything that's Academy Award nominated, those scripts are pretty readily available, and so reading Knives Out in screenplay format, very fun. And what do we have? Now the questions are loading in like weird blocks, so I'm like jumping really to try to. The Blazing Sloth says, any thoughts on Star Trek? I've been watching The Next Generation during this quarantine, and the show's bright, optimistic view of the future is really nice during, in all caps, these uncertain times. I have only, and I'm very guilty, I have only seen the movies, and I know that those are not reflective of what the show is. My roommate, on the flip side, has seen, I think he's working through Deep Space Nine right now, and he started like back in the back with all of them. So he's, and I think he also watched the new CBS All Access version. So I haven't watched those. I apologize. There's just too much media, guys. There's too much. Oh, I think I'm all caught up. Jeffrey Bridges asked, had you read any of the Percy Jackson books? I know they're young adult books, but still quite enjoyable. And do you think Disney Plus can faithfully adapt the book series? I have not read any of the books. I haven't seen the movies, The Lightning Thief, and was there another one? I don't know. But yeah, I haven't read any of the books. I don't know. I mean, I would assume, much like a series of unfortunate events, like giving a book a series run as opposed to a movie run is going to allow you to just expand and explore that world a lot more. So there's that. Eli says, one of my favorite videos of yours is the Batman vs. Superman review. How have you felt about the recent DCU outings, Aquaman, Shazam, Birds of Prey? I missed Birds of Prey entirely. The only movie that I've seen in theaters that was a 2020 release has been Sonic the Hedgehog, which, to harken back to a thing I mentioned earlier, Ben Schwartz is the voice of Dewey Duck in DuckTales, and it is very bizarre that as Dewey Duck, the voice that he uses as Dewey Duck is almost identical to Sonic's, and there is a scene in DuckTales where he plays multiple characters as Dewey Duck, which is very reminiscent of the baseball scene in Sonic the Hedgehog, and I was like, is there just something about Ben Schwartz playing a character that plays multiple characters? It's weird. But that's just a thing. Oscar T asks, have I seen Succession? I haven't. I don't. I only had HBO Now for the briefest of moments, and so I only saw the little bit of The Wire that I saw, but I appreciate... I've heard that it's very good. I've heard that Succession is incredible. HBO just has too many shows. I've heard that Watchmen was great. And honestly, as it's only a single season, because I think it was Lindelof who did it, as Lindelof was like, I'm going to peace out. I kind of like the fact that it basically made it a miniseries, because then I'm more inclined to watch it, because I'm not as scared of needing to commit to... Like, my commitment to The West Wing is a rarity of a thing, because that's 7 seasons that I need to wade through, and it always scares me. Like, will I be able to commit, especially on older shows? Granted, HBO is usually like 10 to 13 episodes per season, so that's a little bit more manageable, but all of them are an hour, so it kind of matches if it's a 22... Whatever. I have a friend who says that OG Blade Runner is better than Blade Runner 2049. I have never seen the original. Do you recommend it, or should I skip it? I would recommend you see it, knowing full well that it is going to be slower than your modern sensibilities. I would also encourage you to see the director's cut if you have the option. If not, I'm not going to be the purist who's going to be like, you lose so much. You get the basic story, but obviously elements are going to be told to you a little bit differently. So I would say any opportunity you can to watch an older film that something else is based off of, you should see it, because you'll probably get more out of the subsequent sequels and other things, because there are definitely nods and Easter eggs. Diddy Dan says, I'll go ahead and bump the question I saw and don't think you answered. I didn't. With the reassessing of the prequel trilogy happening lately, have your opinions changed on them? Largely no. My roommate and I did rewatch all of the films in sequential order. So we watched 1, 2, 3, Solo, Rogue One, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then Rise of Skywalker. We did that over like a series of weeks. The one that I was most pleasantly surprised that I walked away going, oh, that was actually pretty good, was Solo. Because when I saw Solo in theaters, I did not like it at all. I thought that the only scenes that were really strong were the Lando and Han scenes, and everything else was sort of ho-hum. But once you sort of are like, this is going to be more of a swashbuckling adventure than a Star Wars film per se, and like more heisty, I was more on board with it. And I was just like, this is going to be dumb fun. I'm going to have a great time. And I did. Is it still a little eye rolly on like, here's your pistol, here's your name, here's Chewbacca? Yeah, but in rewatching 1, 2, and 3, I still put episode 1 as my favorite of the prequels, which I know is an uncommon one. I just think that episode 1 introduces so many concepts and tilts on the world that we know that it's most fun for me. Even, barring, like, yes, Jar Jar and the accents are very problematic. But the notion of like, hey, welcome back to Tatooine. We're not going back to Mos Eisley Cantina. In fact, we're showing you that there is a whole other quadrant of things and there's other issues at play, is really engaging to me. It was also interesting going back. I had identified earlier that episode 2 was intended to be a noir, and I felt that even more this time around. But episode 3, I wasn't aware as much that it was like, oh, this is a political thriller. Like, you wanted this to be a political thriller. We just didn't. We unfortunately had to be marching towards Darth Vader. And so that, like, the notion of a political spy in the whole situation is like, that just sort of is what it is. Thoughts on Parasite and its Oscar success. Guys, I've been singing the praises of Bong Joon-ho for years. I was talking up Okja when nobody was, I feel. And Snowpiercer and, like, The Host. Like, he is such a great director and writer. The thing that baffles me, honestly, about Parasite is how much CGI work is in it. Like, all of the house, I'm impressed on a technical level about that, but the storytelling and the performances are just killer. Unfortunately, I fear, especially with everything going on in the world, with quarantine and a lot of productions being shut down and everything like that, the thought that perhaps we're going to have another international film winning Best Picture, say, next year, is probably highly unlikely, because the Academy has a tendency to sort of rubber band where they're like, hi, we're being really open to this idea, and then they green book it. No huge slights against Green Book. It's just there were significantly better films that year, and it just seemed like a odd revisionist history and, like, feel-goody choice, also with some issues with everything going on with the director. But, like, okay. But yes, if you haven't seen Parasite, it's one that I've also, like, there are very few movies that I rewatch in a year. Parasite was one that I saw twice. I saw it in theaters and also when I had a screener of it, and, like, my friends were like, we're gonna watch it, and I was like, I will watch it with you, because there are moments in this that I absolutely want to see again. The turn that he does when he picks up the blood on the handkerchief in the trash can is like, he's such a good Singh is such a good actor. He's just so good. Novin Jabun asks, not trying to be rude, but what happened to Obituary? All right, Obituary is still very much a thing. In fact, it is existing in comic form right now. If you go to Webtoon right now, or just go to obituarycartoon.com, we've been posting weekly pages of episodes, and we've been doing Mortuary Mail, where characters within the Obituary universe answer fan-submitted questions. We on Webtoon, our 4th episode is out right now that we're adding to, and I'm actually doing the layout for the 5th episode that we're written, which is actually the first episode that we've written specifically with comics in mind, because up until basically when the pilot of Obituary came out, we had 12 episodes written, like 12 8 to 11 minute long episodes written, with the intention of animation. And we subsequently got some meetings at Cartoon Network, Disney, and Nickelodeon twice. Twice at Nickelodeon, not twice at all of them. And a few meetings with some various animation studios and talked with them about that. Those networks passed. We did get some incredible notes from a Disney exec, and we got questions from the second time that we went into Nickelodeon to pitch. So those have been things that have been very helpful for us. My brother and I, Zach, however, we're still obviously looking to pitch, but it is a little bit tricky without representation. We don't have that. And actually one of the reasons that I'm applying to one of the reasons that I've been watching DuckTales, in addition to it being a very good show, is I want to catch up with all of it because I'm going to be submitting to the Nickelodeon Writers Program, and you need to submit a script of one of the shows on the list. DuckTales is on the list, so I'm trying to familiarize myself with everything DuckTales so I can submit a spec script for that and maybe get into their writing program. But yeah, so we are basically 2 years ago, we decided we should not be content to just have the pilot resting there. So Zach, who has training as, like, he was drawing all of his elementary, middle school, high school life. He had an art teacher and all of that. Basically picked up the brush and is now doing all the line art for the comics. And I do all the layouts and coloring of the comics. And then we both collectively write them together. So, like, we've been ping-ponging scripts back and forth, and then we ping-pong the layouts back and forth, and then his line art, and then I start coloring, and then we go back and forth. So we've actually been doing that for, about 2 years now. Maybe a year and a half. But if you want to read any of the Obituary comics, you can. They are, I would say the easiest way to most compactly read them is to go to Webtoon and then just search Obituary Barrity Bros, and it'll pop right up. Barrity spelled Barryte. Or I believe I put a link on the Obituary pilot. So if you go into there, it should show up. And similarly, we also started a YouTube channel just to showcase some of, like, the behind the scenes, like, sketches. We also have a Patreon for the comic that allows you to get, like, behind the scene commentary on the pages that we've done. And you get a thanks on our website, and you get wallpaper. So that's been stuff that's been happening with Obituary. It is far from dead. Pun. So if you've liked that, I would definitely encourage and appreciate if all of you would check it out, because more buzz on that sort of thing naturally helps us be able to spread it a little bit more. The hope is that we're actually going to be able to make a print comic, because if you can drop something on someone's desk, it's even harder for them to ignore. Sorry, went off on a bit of an Obituary tangent, but I appreciate your interest in that. Then we have... Oh, everything's fine there. Great. Oscar T asks, are you a Twin Peaks fan? I've actually not watched any of Twin Peaks, and I know I need to. It's, again, one of those shows that I'm like, I should watch this, and I haven't, because I'm awful. Rajan Awashithi I apologize. I probably terribly butchered your last name. He asks, have you ever thought of getting on the Blank Check podcast with Griffin Newman and David Sims? I don't know what that is, but if I were offered the opportunity, yes. Is it fair to assume that the premise of the podcast is if you were given a blank check, what would you do? If it were a selfish thing, I would make my cartoon. It would be, I mean, we've gone to animation studios and said, like, how much would it cost? And we've gotten, I mean, the thing is, animation is crazy expensive. Zach and I self-financed the pilot, and that cost a little more than $30,000, and that was at a very cheap rate. And that rate, unfortunately, is not what Studio Yada charges anymore. So we couldn't really afford. The most animation is going to cost you anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 a minute. Which then when you equate that to an 11-minute episode, you're looking at, $100,000 an episode potentially. And if you balloon that out, you're looking at probably, a couple million for just animation costs. That's not accounting for SAG-AFTRA to pay for all the voice actors, and that's not counting for needing to pay your sound engineer or anything like that. That's just animation costs. So that's been fun. So then, what other questions? What is your opinion on the word content? Or you could read it content. I'm content with the amount of content that we have, but not content about the demand for content. I don't know. I'm more thrown Tate Hildyard, who asks the question, by the sort of use of consume media. I find that very gross. But what are you planning to do on YouTube in the near future? Gunnar Dobbins asks. I don't have any real plans. Belated media has always been a thing that I've done as just for fun, and wasn't ever expecting to inadvertently hold up a lightning rod and get the front page of Reddit with what if episode 1 were good. And I obviously followed through on episodes 2 and 3, but I'm much more inclined to be making my own things than critiquing other people's things, if that makes sense. I just find it overall more fulfilling to be building out worlds of my own. That said, if I were like, hey, here's the license to Star Wars, make a movie, I would most certainly play in that sandbox. But I don't necessarily have this is my 1-year plan for Belated Media. Right now, my biggest focus is writing on my own stuff and working on Obituary with my brother. And so I put out 2 reviews. I'm not sure if any of you caught them on both Back to the Future 3 and Avatar. And this actually potentially was going to be sort of a bunch of things, but then I was like, I think it would be more fun to sort of engage with all of you, and I was also fearful of the editing process. But I am so I don't have any plans. That's the I'll make videos when I plan to make videos, and I appreciate you for all sticking with me. And not being like, it's a dead channel. It's not a dead channel because I'm still alive. I will put things on here when I feel so inclined. The Blazing Sloth and said, if Disney came to you and said, make episode 10, do you have any ideas as to what you might do? It's tricky because, if it's called episode 10, the assumption is it is connected in some way to the previous episodes. I would naturally say yes, because if Disney came to me, you don't say no to the mouse. But I would be more interested in getting to sort of build out a world within the Star Wars universe that didn't necessarily have so much already tethered to it. Because the minute, like, you need to drag an anchor with any of the now Skywalker saga. Like, and that is a rough, like, it's a rough road to go on. Because J.J. Abrams was not needing to thread, like, rope. He was needing to thread massive 50-foot cables and to try to make them into something nice. I don't envy anyone who was tasked with that. Like, Colin Trevorrow, similarly, like, that's a rough project to be given, especially so early on in his career. Granted, he has worked on other things before, but to be handed, like, the blockbuster and be like, wrap it up, that's tough. And what's an example of a prequel movie you feel was done super well? Asks Marshall Bowerman. It's a bit of a cheat. I would say that The Godfather Part 2 does it pretty well. I actually have been meaning to do a deep dive on prequels that work. That's been something that, like, there have been a few projects that aren't like exact movie reviews that I've been like, oh, I'd like to do that, but they require a lot more effort and research. And so I wanted to do that. I'd also say the first Fantastic Beasts is pretty good. It doesn't, I wish it didn't dip into like, hey, here's Grindelwald. But other than that, I'd say it's a pretty solid prequel, just in the fact that I guess I'm drawn to prequels that are like, hey, this exists in the world, but has very little bearing on any of the things you've previously seen. Novin Jabin asks, since I mentioned the Sonic movie earlier, what did you think of the Sonic movie? I thought it was fun. I think there are definitely elements that are like, oh, this is a family or kids movie. I also have no attachment to Sonic. Like, I didn't own a Genesis or any of those systems, and never have really taken much to the gameplay itself. So I was untethered to that. But I thought it was enjoyable, but probably have no real need to watch it again. Honestly, the thing that was most exciting about the whole film was the end, just being like, hi, here's Robotnik in like his true form, and here's Tails. That to me was like, oh, I want to see that. I just want to see like a very cartoony movie. But meh. Was Sonic better than Detective Pikachu? I like Detective Pikachu better, but that's just me. Blazing Sloth asks, follow-up question then, will Disney try to continue the Skywalker saga, or do you think they'll try to distance themselves from that now that it's over? Can there be an episode 10 without a Skywalker? I mean, truth be told, I think it would have been smartest for them to go like 1 through 6 are their own movies. We are now going to make a new something that is completely removed or at least adjacent to, and doesn't require us to be like, here's Han Solo. I think episode 10 would just, like, we'd ask the question even harder of like, what more story there is there to tell. But meh. We are nearing what I deem as probably about the right time to wrap up. So if you have any more burning questions, please get them in right now. What did I think of LA Noire? I haven't played the game. Right? No, I haven't played the game. Novin Jabin, as I don't know the Star Trek series very well. I thought that the Star Trek films were fine, but I don't have movies to go off of. Oh, Abraham Bacon. If Leica Studios asked me to work for them, would I? Yes. Leica. First of all, I have a deep, deep, deep love for stop motion animation. And they're one of the few studios who are consistently doing it and doing really ambitious things with it. So, like, in any capacity, I'd say yes. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good is Speed Racer? I'd give it a 9. There are like one or two things that you're like, yeah, that's fine. But Speed Racer is a fun film. And Aaron Hansen will agree with me on that. While we're talking about sequels and prequels that are removed from other films, how did you feel about Toy Story 4? Initially, I was a little put off by it. I thought it was good, and I thought visually, holy hell, Pixar is able to do some impressive stuff. It's an interesting thing because the arc of the first 3 is about Andy's toys, and the arc for 4 is about Woody specifically. And that was the thing that sort of put me off. Also, everything with oh gosh, is her name just Dolly? No, it's not Dolly. The doll in the antique shop. Everything with her was tragic. Kathy is her name? I don't remember. But I thought that like Toy Story 4 was emotionally very rough, and a lot about like letting go and not necessarily feeling bad about being selfish per se, but like also knowing that's as much as you could take care of them. I thought though that like the messaging was pretty interesting. And then what Oscar asks, what is your favorite Studio Ghibli film? It's Princess Mononoke. As someone who loves nature, everything about that film is magnificent, and also Studio Ghibli uses silence really effectively, and the moment that it's King of the Forest, I believe, shows up, and it's just silence, makes like it sets you back on your heels, just filling you with awe. And then Garrett Hicks asked, "Are you open to making a What If the sequels were good?" I've already answered that, Garrett, but the short answer is I'd likely only do episode 9. And I have no immediate plans to be tackling that, just as I'm working on things like Obituary, and I'm working on other personal writing projects and other work-related things, which I can't unfortunately disclose to you at the moment. What do you think of Rogue One, Stuart? I hate to just be like, check out my video on it, but check out my video on it. Thoughts on them doing The Matrix 4? If they think that there's something worth telling in there, have at it. And I have not seen Museo. If I could reboot any series, what would it be? I don't necessarily feel the need to really reboot things. I'd much rather just take, like, if a film series is good. Well, I suppose it's hard because it's like, if a film series is good, I don't really feel there is a need to reboot it. But at the same time, I understand like musicals on Broadway get revivals all the time, and why? Because they are stories that are good. But I'd be more inclined to try to find like a film that conceptually is very good, but was flawed in execution, and try to reboot that. As to what that film is, I don't know, but that would be what I would be more drawn to than necessarily like rebooting like Back to the Future, which Don't do that. It's my favorite film trilogy. No, that's not true. Lord of the Rings is my favorite film trilogy. Back to the Future is my favorite, like, standalone in a trilogy, I think. Maybe? I don't know. It's like my third favorite film. But I think with that, everyone, I thank you again so much for joining me for this quarantine stream. I hope all of you have also, like, caught different shows that maybe you can be watching, or movies. And if you haven't checked out Obituary in comic form, go to Webtoons or obituarycartoon.com, obituarycartoon.com, and you can read the new episodes that exist over there. Also, if you want to join the Patreon and support Obituary, that would be swell. But thank you all again so much for joining. Maybe we'll do more of these in the future. And I appreciate you all. Stay safe and keep loving movies, guys.